A cowboy rescued a woman from snow, then learned she was carrying his future child. The wind howled across the wide, empty plains, carrying with it sharp flakes of snow that stung Jack Lawson's face as he rode his horse through the storm. The winter had come early that year, and it had come hard. Snow covered the ground in a thick, unbroken blanket, and the cold bit through the layers of wool and leather Jack wore. His horse, a strong bay named Rusty, moved carefully, hooves crunching over the frozen ground.
Jack had been out checking his fences when the storm had struck, and now, with the day fading fast, he was trying to make his way back to his cabin.
Jack was used to the harshness of the Wyoming winter. He had grown up on this land, learning to read the wind, the clouds, and the snow. But even for someone like him, this storm was unforgiving. The visibility was low, and the world seemed to shrink to a blur of white and gray. Every now and then he would stop and listen, hearing only the wind and the faint creaking of Rusty's harness. It was in one of these quiet moments, just as he was thinking about turning back, that he heard it, a faint, desperate sound, carried by the wind. At first, he thought it might be the wind playing tricks, but then he heard it again. A cry, weak but persistent. Jack's brow furrowed. He had learned long ago that no one could survive long in a storm like this without shelter. Without thinking twice, he guided Rusty toward the sound, moving carefully over the uneven, snow-covered ground. The cries grew louder as he approached a small ravine, where the snow had drifted deep. There, partially buried in the snow, was a woman. She was lying on her side, her arms wrapped around herself, as if trying to keep her warmth. Her hair, dark and damp, was plastered to her face, and her clothing was torn and wet. She shivered violently, her breath shallow and ragged. Jack's heart tightened. He had seen frostbite before, and he knew she wouldn't last much longer if she stayed here. "Hey!" he called, his voice strong against the wind. "Hold on, I've got you." The woman opened her eyes slowly. They were wide, scared, and full of pain, perhaps. She tried to speak, but her lips barely moved, forming nothing more than a faint whisper. Jack didn't wait. Burrow. He dismounted and ran through the snow, wrapping his arms around her and lifting her carefully. She was lighter than he expected, but stiff with cold. Rusty nickered softly, as if sensing the urgency. Jack swung her over his shoulder, keeping his face shielded from the wind, and began trudging toward higher ground where the snow was less deep. His cabin was miles away, and every step was a battle. The snow pulled at his boots, the wind tried to knock him off balance, and Rusty followed, snorting and pawing at the ground. Jack focused on the cabin's small chimney, a thin line of smoke barely visible in the white haze. That was his goal. That was warmth. That was life. Finally, after what felt like hours, he reached the cabin. He kicked the door open and dragged the woman inside, setting her gently on the floor in front of the fireplace. The warmth hit her immediately, and she shivered even harder, a mix of cold and relief. Jack dropped to his knees beside her, pulling off her wet gloves and jacket, wrapping her in blankets he had laid out. He worked quickly, his hands practiced from years of ranch life. He poured a cup of hot tea and gently lifted it to her lips, coaxing her to sip. "Here," he said softly, trying not to startle her. "Drink a little, Bay. It'll help warm you up." The woman took the cup shakily. Her hands trembled so much that Jack had to steady them. She sipped slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. She was young, maybe in her mid-20s. And though she was weak now, there was a strength in her eyes that told Jack she wasn't used to giving up. Breath.
"What's your name?" Jack asked, keeping his voice low, almost gentle, as if speaking too loudly would break the fragile peace. "Emily," she whispered.
"Emily!" Jack repeated, as if testing the name against the storm outside. "You're safe now." You're going to be okay.
Emily closed her eyes for a moment, shivering violently despite the blankets.
Jack could see the frostbite beginning to set in on her fingers and toes. He moved quickly, fetching warm water and gently washing her hands and face. Did the baby in her web, whereof it all the pain, careful not to cause pain. Emily's teeth chattered, and she moaned softly, but she did not resist. "Where were you?" Jack asked, though he already had an idea.
"Out in that store." Emily nodded weakly.
I was traveling to the next town. I didn't expect the storm. It came so fast. Jack frowned. The roads were treacherous, and few people dared travel in such weather.
"You shouldn't have been out there alone," he said, his voice steady but edged with concern. "It's dangerous."
You could have died.
I didn't know,"
Emily said, her voice barely audible. I didn't have a choice. Jack looked at her. There was honesty in her words. Desperation, yes, but no deceit. He nodded once, silently accepting that he couldn't change the past. All he could do was make sure she survived the night. Hours passed. The storm outside raged, but inside the cabin the fire crackled and the air smelled of pine smoke and warmth. Emily rested under several blankets, still shivering but slowly regaining strength. Jack sat in a chair nearby, keeping an eye on her, restless and uneasy. He wasn't used to having someone in his cabin. His life had always been solitary, filled with long days of ranch work and quiet nights under the stars. But now, hearing Emily's soft breathing and feeling the tension in her body, he realized how much he had missed the presence of another person.
At one point, Emily stirred and opened her eyes.
I don't even know how to thank you, she said, her voice hoarse. Jack shook his head. Psst. No need for that. Just rest.
You'll need your strength for the journey ahead. She tried to sit up, but a wave of weakness made her slump back against the blankets.
Jack moved quickly to support her. Easy. Don't move too much. You've been through a lot. Emily looked at him, her dark eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and something deeper. Fear, perhaps, or relief. Jack didn't know, and he didn't press. Sometimes words weren't necessary. Sometimes just surviving together was enough. The night grew darker. The storm outside seemed relentless. But inside the cabin, the fire and blankets kept Emily alive. Jack fetched more wood, tending the fire with care. He glanced at her from time to time, noting the slight rise and fall of her chest as she slept. There was a fragility to her now, but he could see the strength beneath it. She had survived the storm, and she would survive beyond it too. As he worked, Jack's mind wandered. He thought of the many winters he had spent alone, riding across the plains, repairing fences and tending to the cattle. He had never had a companion, not really. There had been women before, fleeting moments of connection, but nothing that had lasted. And yet, now, with Emily here, he felt a pull he hadn't expected, a sense that his life, until now predictable and solitary, might be about to change. By dawn, the storm had subsided. The wind was still cold, but the sky showed hints of pale sunlight breaking through the clouds. Emily woke slowly, blinking against the new light. She was stronger now, her shivering less violent, and her color returning. Jack offered her tea again, and this time she drank more confidently. "Thank you," she said again, this time more firmly. I thought I was going to die out there. Jack nodded, keeping his eyes on hers. You're safe now. That's what matters. You made it. Breaths. For a moment they sat in silence, listening to the soft crackle of the fire and the occasional gust of wind outside. The cabin, simple and quiet, felt like a sanctuary against the harsh world beyond its walls. And in that quiet, Jack felt something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose beyond the land and the cattle, beyond the daily grind of survival.
Emily looked at him, a faint smile touching her lips despite the lingering fear.
I don't know how I'll ever repay you, she said softly. Jack shook his head. Breaths. You don't need to. Just survive. That's all I ask. And for the first time in a long time, both of them felt a fragile hope flicker amidst the harsh winter, a hope that against all odds, life could be kind, even in the coldest of storms. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the small frost-covered window of Jack's cabin, casting long, pale beams across the wooden floor. Outside, the world had turned into a sparkling wonderland. Snow glittered on every branch, every fence post, and every blade of frozen grass. The storm had passed, leaving a quiet, almost peaceful silence over the plains. Jack stood by the fire, pouring another cup of tea for Emily. The steam curled gently into the chilly air, warming the cabin, blinking against the bright light. She looked pale, but stronger than the night before. But stronger than the night before, Bus. Her hair was dry now, tangled and damp in places, but she seemed more awake, more alert. When she finally sat up, she shivered a little, though it was from weakness rather than cold. Brave. Jack handed her the steaming cup with a gentle smile. Here, he said. Drink. It'll help you wake up. Emily took the cup carefully, cradling it with both hands. She blew on the tea before sipping, and then set it down, her fingers still wrapped around the warm mug.
Thank you,
she said softly, her voice stronger than the previous day. I don't even know how to say it. I almost didn't make it. Jack shook his head. You're here now. That's what matters. You survived. He looked at her, noticing the way her shoulders were stiff, the way she held herself carefully, as if afraid to move too much. You need to rest. You're still weak. Brothers.
Emily nodded, glancing around the cabin. It was small but sturdy, filled with the simple things of a cowboy's life. Tools, a few shelves of books, a worn table, and the always burning fireplace.
Everything smelled faintly of wood smoke and leather, a comforting, steady scent. She could see the snow outside the window, unbroken and bright, stretching to the horizon. You live out here alone? She asked, her voice curious but cautious. Jack nodded. But, yeah, been out here most of my life.
My family's gone. Just me and the land now.
Emily looked down, wrapping her arms around herself. It must be lonely. He wasn't used to talking about feelings, not with anyone. But there was something about Emily, her quiet strength, her vulnerability, that made it feel different. It can be, but it's honest work. The land doesn't lie and it doesn't judge. Emily smiled faintly, a small, genuine curve of her lips. I suppose there's something comforting in that. The morning passed slowly. Jack helped her wash up and change into dry clothes, simple garments he had set aside for emergencies. Emily moved carefully, still feeling the effects of the cold and exhaustion, but she was determined not to appear weak. Jack didn't push her, only offering quiet guidance when needed. He chopped wood for the fire, refilled the kettle, and moved around the cabin with practiced ease. Every now and then he would glance at her, noting the small signs of recovery. A faint flush in her cheeks, the steadier rhythm of her breathing, the way she lifted herself onto the chair by the window. "You should eat something," Jack said around noon, setting a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried meat in front of her. "You need your strength." Emily hesitated, then nodded, picking up the bread carefully. She ate slowly, savoring the taste, her eyes occasionally meeting Jack's. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, a recognition that both had survived something dangerous and that trust had been born in the process. For the rest of the day, the two of them settled into a quiet rhythm. Emily rested when she felt tired, and Jack went about his work around the cabin. He cleaned, tended to the fire, and made sure the roof was secure against future storms. When Emily ventured out to the small yard for a short walk, Jack followed at a distance, keeping an eye on her without making her feel restricted. "You're very careful," Emily said quietly as she watched him chop wood. "Even with me here." Jack paused, leaning on his axe, breaths. "I've seen what winter can do. I've lost people to storms before." "I don't plan to lose anyone else." His gaze softened, though he quickly looked away, returning to his work. Breath. Emily's eyes followed him. She could see the care in his movements, the quiet strength in his presence. I don't even know how to thank you properly," she murmured. Jack shook his head. "Take care of yourself. That's enough. Pray." As the day moved on, they began to talk. Emily shared small pieces of her story, her journey to the next town, her family back home, the reason she was traveling alone. Jack listened, occasionally asking questions, but mostly letting her speak. There was a gentleness to his attention, a patience that Emily found comforting after the terror of the storm. "I didn't think I'd make it through the night," Emily said quietly, staring into the fire. "I kept thinking, Narration. Jack nodded, understanding. "I know that feeling." "Out here! It's easy to think you're finished, but you fought through." "Bet. That counts for something."
Emily looked at him, a hint of admiration in her eyes.
"It does, doesn't it?"
Jack didn't answer with words. Instead, he gave her a small, reassuring smile.
There was a quiet strength in that smile, one that spoke of survival, resilience, and trust. The afternoon sun melted some of the snow outside, turning the world into a mixture of white and gray. Emily ventured out again, this time walking a little further, testing her strength. Jack followed, making sure she was safe, offering his hand when she slipped on the ice. But trust between them deepened with each small action, each shared moment. By evening, Emily was sitting by the fire again, a blanket around her shoulders, her cheeks warm and rosy from the day's movement. Jack sat across from her, quietly mending a piece of leather for his saddle. The silence between them was comfortable, a contrast to the storm of the previous day. "I never imagined someone would come for me like that," Emily said suddenly, breaking the quiet. "I thought I was alone out there. Completely alone." Jack looked up, his eyes meeting hers.
You weren't. You're never truly alone out here.
"Not if you keep going, not if you hold on. And now you've got me." Breath. Emily smiled softly, a mixture of gratitude and something she didn't quite understand. "Thank you for everything."
Jack nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest that had little to do with the fire.
He had saved her life, yes, But in doing so, something inside him had shifted. Her presence, her gratitude, her resilience. It stirred feelings he hadn't felt in years. Breaths. He wasn't ready to name them yet, but he sensed they were important. Breaths. Night fell, and the cabin grew quiet. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Emily lay down under her blankets, finally feeling safe enough to sleep. Jack watched her for a few moments, ensuring she was comfortable before he settled into his own bedroll nearby, breathfully. Outside, the wind whispered against the cabin, but inside, there was a fragile peace, a sense that they had survived something together. Over the next few days, Emily continued to recover. She began helping Jack with small chores around the cabin, fetching water, stacking firewood, and even preparing simple meals. Jack taught her how to handle the basic tools she needed, guiding her patiently. They shared meals, quiet conversations, and occasional laughter. Each day the bond between them grew, though neither dared to name it yet. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Emily sat by the window watching the snow melt into slushy streams. Jack joined her, leaning against the frame. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly. Emily looked at him, a faint smile on her lips. "I had a good teacher," she replied, thinking of how he had carried her through the storm and cared for her when she was weakest. Jack didn't answer immediately, only nodded. There was something about her words that lingered in the air between them, something unspoken, something that felt like the beginning of a connection neither had expected, but both welcomed. Days turned into a week, and Emily grew stronger. She began to walk farther from the cabin, exploring the small area around it, while Jack worked on his ranch duties. They shared stories of the past, dreams of the future, and small, quiet moments of comfort. The harsh winter had brought them together in an unexpected way, and now, in the calm after the storm, a sense of companionship and trust settled over them. By the end of the week, Emily was able to stand at the edge of the snow-covered fields, looking out at the vast plains stretching toward the horizon. Jack stood beside her, silently sharing the view. The world was still cold, still harsh, but it was alive. And they were alive within it, together. And in that moment, both of them understood that their lives had changed forever. What had begun as a rescue, a simple act of survival, had grown into something more, something neither could yet name but both could feel. A bond forged in the storm, a trust built in quiet moments, and a fragile tentative hope that whatever came next, they would face it together. Spring came slowly to the Wyoming plains. The snow had melted, leaving patches of green grass that shone in the morning sun, and the air smelled fresh and alive after months of winter. The trees, bare for so long, had begun to show tiny buds, promising new growth. Jack Lawson and Emily Carter had settled into a quiet rhythm, their days filled with chores, simple meals, and moments of shared laughter. The harshness of winter was behind them, but the memory of the storm, the night Jack had rescued her, still lingered, a silent bond connecting them. Emily had grown stronger over the past weeks. She moved with more confidence, her cheeks rosy, and her eyes brighter. Yet there was a subtle change in her demeanor. Sometimes she would pause while doing tasks, her hand resting on her stomach as if remembering something. Jack noticed it, but he did not ask immediately. He had learned that some things took time to reveal themselves, and Emily was cautious in her own way. One quiet afternoon, Emily was sitting by the window, sewing a patch on one of Jack's old coats. The cabin was warm, sunlight streaming through the glass, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and melting snow. Jack was outside mending a fence, his hands rough and steady, his focus sharp. The sound of his hammer against the post carried faintly through the cabin. Emily paused in her work, taking a deep breath. She had been thinking about it for days. How to tell Jack, how to share the truth without frightening him. But she could no longer wait. She folded the coat neatly and set it aside, then walked to where he was working. "Jack!" she called softly. He looked up, his eyes meeting hers. There was a quiet concern in his gaze, the kind that had grown over the weeks as he watched her recover from the storm. "Yes," he replied, lowering his hammer. Emily took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "There's, something I need to tell you. Something important." Jack straightened, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "All right. Go ahead." She paused, gathering courage. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Jack blinked, trying to process her words. Rasp. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint smell of earth and new grass, but all he could hear was the sound of his own heartbeat.
You're carrying...
Despera. Emily nodded, her eyes searching his face for a reaction. "Yes." Breaths. "I didn't know how to tell you. I wasn't sure what you'd think." Jack took a step closer, his mind racing. Then, slowly, realization dawned on him. He remembered the brief moments before the storm, the connection he had shared with Emily months earlier during a fleeting visit to the nearby town. The timing, the pieces fell into place. He swallowed hard, emotions swirling inside him. Surprise, fear, but also a deep, unexpected joy. I think... Breath. "It's mine," he said slowly, almost in disbelief, his voice trembling slightly. Emily's eyes widened, and relief washed over her face. "Jack," she whispered, her hand instinctively moving to rest on her stomach. Jack looked at her, a mixture of awe and responsibility settling over him. He had always been independent, living alone on the plains, answering only to himself. But now, the reality of fatherhood was before him, sudden and overwhelming. He felt a fierce protective instinct rising, stronger than anything he had known before. Breaths. "We have a child coming," he said softly, almost to himself. "A little one." Emily nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. "Yes." "I didn't plan this, but it feels right. Somehow, even with everything that's happened, it feels right." Bish. Jack reached out, taking her hand gently in his own. The warmth of her skin, the small pulse of life beneath her fingers, grounded him. "Bration, we'll face it together," he said firmly. "I'll be here."
I promise. I won't let anything happen to you or the baby.
Breath. For a long moment, they stood there in silence, the breeze rustling the newly budding trees, the sun casting a golden glow across the plains. It was a new beginning, fragile and uncertain, but filled with possibility. Over the next few days, the reality of the situation settled in. Jack began preparing the cabin for the new arrival. He cleared space for a crib, patched the walls, and made sure the fireplace was safe and warm. He even started gathering supplies, thinking ahead to the months to come. Emily watched him, her heart full of gratitude and admiration. The cowboy she had once seen as distant and solitary now showed a tenderness she hadn't expected. Jack, in turn, watched Emily with a new kind of attention. He noticed the way she moved, the small gestures she made, and the careful way she rested when she needed to. He asked questions gently. offering guidance without being overbearing. He wanted her to feel safe, not just physically but emotionally too. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Emily sat on the cabin steps, her hands resting on her stomach. Jack joined her, sitting beside her silently. The plain stretched out before them, quiet and vast, the sky reflecting their unspoken thoughts.
I was scared, Emily said softly, breaking the silence.
I didn't know if I could handle this. I didn't know if you would.
She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence.
Breath whisper. Jack turned to her, taking her hands in his.
You don't need to be scared, he said firmly.
We'll figure it out. We'll make it work.
Bye.
You're not alone anymore. Emily looked at him, tears glistening in her eyes.
I never expected this. I never imagined I'd find someone like you, someone who cares so much. Right. Jack smiled, a rare, gentle smile. Life has a way of surprising us. We survived the storm, didn't we? Maybe this is part of that survival. A new kind of life. They sat together as the sky darkened, feeling the quiet strength of their bond. The fear of the unknown was still there, but it was tempered by trust and hope. Jack knew that the coming months would be challenging, but he also knew he would not face them alone. Emily, too, felt a deep sense of security she had not known before. Days turned into weeks, and Emily's pregnancy became more apparent. Jack adapted to the changes with surprising ease. He carried more water, cooked simple meals, and made sure the cabin was comfortable for her. The two of them worked together, their movements and routines blending seamlessly. Sometimes they laughed over small mistakes. Sometimes they shared quiet, reflective moments. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. One afternoon, while tending to the garden he had started near the cabin, Jack looked up and saw Emily walking toward him. Breaths. She had a gentle smile on her face, and there was a glow about her that made him pause. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice soft but determined. "Inspiration. About the baby. About us. About the future." Jack set down his tools, giving her his full attention. "Go on," he said. Breath.
Emily took a deep breath. I want us to be a family.
I know it's sudden, and I know it won't be easy, but I feel like this is meant to be. I don't want to hide or run anymore. I want us to face everything together. Jack's chest tightened. He had never felt so strongly, so clearly, that his life had a new purpose. He took her hands in his again, holding them firmly. I feel the same. I want that too.
We'll build it together, one day at a time.
Over the next few months, their days were filled with preparation and quiet joy. Jack taught Emily simple ranch tasks that were safe for her, while she helped with organizing the cabin and making it welcoming. They shared meals, stories, and dreams. They talked about the child's future, imagining a life filled with love, safety, and the wide-open plains they both cherished. Evenings were the most precious. They would sit by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes just holding hands in silence. The storm that had brought them together seemed like a distant memory now, replaced by the warmth of home and the promise of new life. And through it all, they learned something important. That family wasn't just about blood, but about trust, care, and choosing to face the world together. The bond forged in the cold, harsh winter had grown into something unbreakable, strengthened by each shared hardship, each small victory, and each quiet, tender moment. Jack often looked at Emily and felt a deep, protective love he hadn't known he was capable of. Emily, in turn, felt safe and cherished in a way she had never experienced. They were no longer two individuals surviving in a harsh world. They were a team, a family in the making, ready to face whatever came next. The plains stretched endlessly around them, wide and open, full of possibility. And for the first time in their lives, both Jack and Emily felt truly at home. Not just on the land, but in each other's presence. The weeks passed quickly, and spring deepened into summer. The plains were alive with color. Green grass swayed in the warm breeze. Wild flowers dotted the meadows, and the sky was a brilliant blue that stretched endlessly above. Jack Lawson and Emily Carter had grown accustomed to their life together, though it was anything but ordinary. The cabin had been rearranged and improved for comfort. A small crib stood in one corner, fresh linens were folded neatly, and the firewood was stacked high to last through any future storms. Every day, Jack and Emily worked side by side, preparing for the arrival of their child. Emily moved carefully now, walking slower than before, her hand often resting on her growing stomach. Jack noticed every small change, the way she tired quickly, the way she would pause to breathe deeply after simple tasks. His protective instincts were strong, and he adjusted his routines to keep her safe. He fetched water, tended the small garden, and cooked meals, making sure she had enough nourishment. "Here," Jack said one morning, handing her a cup of warm milk. "Drink this. It'll help with the aches."
Emily smiled, accepting it.
"Thank you, Jack. You've done so much already."
"I don't know how I'll ever repay you."
"You don't need to," Jack replied with a faint smile. "Just take care of yourself and the baby. That's all that matters." Evenings were their favorite time. They would sit outside the cabin, leaning against each other, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Sometimes they talked about the future, imagining the life they would have with their child. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the distant calls of birds or the soft rustle of the wind through the tall grass. One evening, as they watched the sun sink behind the hills, Emily spoke softly.
"Do you ever think about what life will be like once the baby arrives?" Jack nodded. "Every day."
"But I know it won't be easy. But I also know that we'll figure it out together."
"We've survived storms before, and we can survive anything life throws at us."
Emily rested her head against his shoulder.
I'm not scared when I'm with you. I feel safe.
I feel like no matter what happens, we'll be all right. Jack tightened his arm around her, a deep warmth spreading through him. "That's how I feel, too," he said quietly. "We'll face everything together, Emily. Narration, you, me, and our child.
We'll make a life worth living right here."
As the weeks turned into months, Emily's belly grew rounder, a living symbol of the life they had created together. Jack's anticipation grew with each passing day.
He often found himself imagining the child. Whether it would have Emily's dark eyes or his own stubborn determination, what kind of personality it would have, and how it would change their world forever.
He also worried, of course.
There were so many things he didn't know about raising a child, about what the future might hold. But he refused to let fear rule him. Every time he looked at Emily, saw her strength, her care, and the way she smiled despite the discomfort of pregnancy, he found courage. They had already faced so much together. What was a few more challenges compared to that?
One afternoon, Emily was sitting under the shade of a tree, gently rocking back and forth as she stroked her belly. Jack joined her, sitting down beside her.
"I was thinking," Emily said, her voice calm, "about how our child will grow up out here, surrounded by the land. I want them to know how to survive, how to respect the earth, and how to love it.
Just like you taught me. Jack smiled, feeling a lump in his throat.
We'll teach them everything they need to know. We'll make sure they're strong and kind and safe. And we'll make sure they know how loved they are every single day. Emily leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Glad I have you, Jack. I can't imagine doing this with anyone else. Perhaps.
Jack kissed the top of her head gently. And you won't have to.
We're a team now. Always. Breaking. And the days grew longer. The garden flourished, birds nested nearby, and the plains seemed to hum with life. Emily's movements were slower, more deliberate, but she was still determined to help with small chores around the cabin. Jack adapted his routines, giving her work that was safe and manageable. They laughed together at small mishaps, a spilled bucket of water, a crooked row of plants, and celebrated small victories, like a perfectly baked bread or a newly planted flower patch. One evening, after a long day of preparing the cabin and garden, Jack and Emily sat outside, watching the sun cast long shadows over the fields. Emily shifted slightly, her hand resting on her belly.
I think I'm ready, she said softly.
Jack's heart tightened. He understood immediately. The moment they had been preparing for had arrived. He stood, helping her to her feet. "All right," he said, his voice steady, though his chest thumped with anticipation. "Let's get you comfortable inside. The baby will be here soon." Inside the cabin, Jack had prepared a small, warm space for Emily to rest. He gathered blankets, made sure the fire burned gently, and arranged everything they might need. He stayed close to her side, offering gentle words of encouragement and support.
Hours passed.
Emily's breathing grew heavy, and Jack's hands were steady, holding hers, whispering comfort when needed. The storm of the past winter seemed far away now, replaced by the storm of creation, the miracle of life that Emily carried. Jack felt a mixture of awe, fear, and overwhelming love as he guided her through each moment. Finally, as the night deepened and the cabin was filled with quiet determination and soft murmurs, the baby arrived. A small cry filled the room, delicate but strong, a tiny new life taking its first breath. Jack's eyes filled with tears as he looked at the child, seeing both Emily and himself in the small, perfect bundle. It's beautiful," Emily whispered, exhausted but radiant, tears streaking her face. "Look at them! They're perfect!" Jack nodded, holding the baby carefully in his arms. "They are. And we're going to take care of them. We'll give them a life full of love, safety, and everything they need." Emily reached out, touching the baby's tiny hand.
We did this together, she said softly.
Jack kissed her hand gently. "Yes, we did. And we'll keep doing it every day. Together." The days that followed were filled with quiet wonder and adjustment. Emily rested and recovered, while Jack took on the role of caretaker and protector, learning the rhythms of feeding, comforting, and rocking their child to sleep. Each moment was a lesson, each day a small triumph. They laughed at small mishaps, like spilled milk or sleepless nights, and celebrated every milestone from the baby's first smile to their first tiny grasp of Jack's finger. The cabin, once a place of solitude, now echoed with life, laughter, and love. Jack and Emily shared responsibilities, always supporting each other. They spoke softly at night, planning the child's future, imagining the years to come, and cherishing the simple joys of everyday life.
Jack often stood outside, looking out over the plains, feeling a deep sense of peace.
He had faced storms, loneliness, and hardship. But now he had a family, a woman he loved and a child they had created together. The vast open land stretched endlessly before them, full of possibility, and he knew they would face it together. Emily, too, felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. She had survived the storm, found trust and love in Jack, and now held their child in her arms. Life was unpredictable, yes, but it was beautiful, filled with moments of grace, joy, and quiet triumph. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant colors over the plains, Jack and Emily sat outside, holding their child between them. The world was calm, the breeze gentle, and the sky seemed to reflect the warmth they felt inside.
We did it! Emily whispered, smiling.
Yes, Jack replied, holding them both close. We did.
And we'll keep doing it every day.
And in that moment, surrounded by the vast beauty of the plains, the warmth of their cabin, and the love they shared, Jack and Emily knew that they had found their home not just in a place, but in each other, and in the family they had created together. The storm that had brought them together seemed like a distant memory now. What remained was life, love, and the quiet certainty that no matter what came next, they would face it together, as a family, whole and strong.